It's an emotional response, a natural one, but it can be quite destructive to our games. How can we avoid this and stay focused? Hello and welcome to Epic Flail 40k Tactics. My name's Luke, and this week I will be mostly talking about tilt. More specifically, how to understand it, address it, keep calm, and carry on. Frustration turns into bad decisions, turns into more frustration, into more bad decisions, and before we know it, a game's completely run away from us. Throughout this video, I'll discuss a range of different causes and techniques we have at our disposal to brush the negativity off, to rise above tilt, so that we can have better games of 40k more consistently. Let's get started. So I touched on tilt being frustration, and it's a state of emotional imbalance, a mental fog that sort of seeps in when frustration, anger, or disappointment take over during a game of 40k. And sometimes this can be without us even realizing it. Ultimately, whether we consider the frustration element to be the cause or effect of tilt, the point is we're shaken. Things have happened in a game which have unsettled us in some way or another. Maybe the dice have betrayed us, or we've realized something in the middle of a game that we've done wrong. Whatever the trigger might be, the tilt then sets in. We start second guessing everything. We start making plays that are either too conservative or too aggressive in an effort to try and correct something. Our judgment is clouded. We start making rash decisions which then cascade into full-blown mistakes. I believe it was poker where the term was originated, and in poker it often manifests in over-aggression or reckless plays. Overplaying your hand, or in a 40k setting it might represent itself in being a bit too aggressive, overcommitting units to a losing battle, and in doing so we begin to lose focus on what our objectives are because of these plays. Or maybe instead of second guessing everything we're doing, we become overly fixated on our opponent's behavior. These are just a handful of ways in which tilt rears its head, and when we become tilted, we're playing the game from a negative headspace. It makes it harder to think strategically, maintaining the calm, calculated mindset that is conducive to a good game. And if we think about it, in a game as layered and complex as 40k, often small decisions can snowball. Tilt can mean the difference between a hard-fought victory and a crushing loss. There's an overview of tilt there, and some common things that can trigger an emotional response, which is ultimately what tilt is, are as follows. We can have bad dice rolls. It is a really obvious one, but it staggers me that after so many years playing this game, how the dice affect us, myself included. We all get frustrated when we're trying to kill a unit that's got a 5+ feel no pain, and our opponent rolls lots of 5+ feel no pains, and we don't kill the thing that we were expecting to kill. We can calculate probabilities all day, but sometimes the dice just don't cooperate, and missing key rolls is incredibly frustrating. And that's okay. It's okay to be frustrated, but feel that feeling, accept it, take a deep breath, but move on. Especially when the stakes are high, that negativity can creep in. It's moments like that where we make a play and we've set up our units based on that play. If that play doesn't work because of bad dice, it's natural to have an emotional response, and that can be the start of a spiral. Misplays as well. I touched on misplays. We forgot to move a critical unit or charge when we should have held back. I did this recently in a game where I set up for some charges and I wanted to use CP for increasing my charge range and for a +1 to wound stratagem in combat, but I didn't have enough CP. I hadn't managed my CP properly, but I'd set up my turn as if I had CP for that, and so it was a big misplay because then I was putting my units in positions where they weren't reliably going to destroy the units they were going to connect with, which had negative implications as the game went on. Again, very frustrating. We can start to beat ourselves up in those situations, and when we play against tough opponents or matchups, that can be really demoralizing. They head into a certain faction because they think in their mind, oh, my faction never beats that faction. My army's win rate into that army is super low at the moment. The game's over before it's even begun. 1, no it's not. And 2, yes it is, if that's how you're thinking. We need to get our minds out of that and think about what agency we have in these games and how we can leverage that to turn that matchup around. As the alternative is to go on tilt, write the match off before it's even started, and then not make the right plays because our head is not in the right space. Opponent behavior is another one. We're all here to enjoy the game, but occasionally we'll play a salty or condescending opponent, or someone who just doesn't vibe with us. Maybe they're very competitive and you are someone who is not so competitive. You want to try and win, but you're not that bothered, and the way that they're playing just doesn't fit the vibe that you normally have at the gaming table. If their attitude is jarring, that can pull you out of your mental rhythm. And the best piece of advice I can give to anyone like that is that both players are there to have fun in their own ways. And it's up to ourselves to try and create the best possible experience. If our opponent is sadly not upholding their part of the social contract, then it's not unreasonable to gently remind them of that. Try to bring it out to the foreground that we're here to try and create a pleasant experience for both players. Always try that. If their attitude doesn't change, then that's not our fault. That's our opponent's fault for having a negative mindset. And it's not something that we should feel the onus of responsibility to try and change. If they're making a conscious decision to behave in a certain way, we can't change that. Focus on the game, focus on what you can try and take away from that. Don't let their bad vibes bring you down. So how can we avoid tilt? How can we stay focused? I want to talk about some strategies and things we can take forward. But before I do, if you're enjoying this kind of content, then check out Epic Flower HQ. If you become a member there, you get access to even more content like this. This week, I'm doing a part 2 on tilt, and it will be available to members only on Epic Flower HQ. Not only that, if you become a member, you get access to our Discord and additional content and entertainment podcasts about 40k. And not only that, it's the home of UKTC streams. So if you're interested in UKTC competitive 40k live stream games, check out Epic Flower HQ. How to avoid tilt. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's accepting that tilt happens. It's an emotional response. We're allowed to feel our emotions. That's okay. It can be awkward when we're playing 40k with a stranger in a public place and we get really upset about the dice, but that's okay. We're not immune to it, no matter how experienced we are. But the key is to learn how to manage that. And the first step for that, I truly believe this, it's as cheesy as this sounds, is acknowledging mistakes, bad rolls, and tough games are part of the experience, part of the 40k experience. And we're only human. When we expect challenges like this and we accept that that's a part of what can happen, we're less likely to be blindsided by them. Slight tangent here. Captain Jean-Luc Picard said it best.
It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness. That is life.
That is life. Or 40k. But the point is, we can do everything right and the game can still go south. Feel it, express it in an appropriate and inoffensive way. Take a deep breath. Say to yourself, can't change it, move on. The other thing is to control physical reactions as well, which sounds a little bit strange, but one of the fastest ways tilt can spread is through our body language. Slamming dice down, sighing loudly, throwing arms up in frustration. And this is bad sportsmanship, regardless of how, on the one hand, I'm saying it's okay to feel these things and accept that it's an emotional experience, but if we're behaving badly in this way, it's just going to reinforce a negative mindset. You're going to see your opponent giving you the side eye or outwardly expressing distaste. Maybe the judge is seeing what you're doing and not taking too kindly to it. Just as I said, take a deep breath, reset your posture. A great piece of advice, take a step away from the table, a breath of fresh air, splash of water on the face, recenter yourself. If we're not careful, that expression can escalate, and that's when it's really bad. We want expression, not escalation. We want to focus on playing the mission. Focus primarily on what we can control. Bad dice rolls, as I say, can't change it. But what we can do is adapt. Instead of fixating on the dice, the correct thing is, how do we get out of this hole? If our shooting phase didn't pan out, we didn't kill the thing we went out to kill, reevaluate what we have to do now. Can we reposition for next turn? Is there a stratagem we can utilize to do the damage instead? We're going to have to tank shot, for example, where we didn't really want to charge, but if there's one wound left, that's all we need to do to kill that knight. We're going to have to send a truck in to try and finish it. Or we now going to have to reposition a weaker unit to a move block instead. What are our options? That's the thing we should be turning to and focusing our energy on instead of the panic and the frustration, keeping our attention on what is actionable. The next thing is to set realistic expectations. If we're playing a mean tier army against whatever happens to be at the top of the meta at the moment, we're probably not going to walk away with a win. And that's okay. A big thing that tilt stems from, and again, if we think of it as an emotional response, is from unmet expectations or expectations that were unrealistic in the first place. If we instead set realistic goals, like maximizing secondary objectives or eliminating a key enemy unit, we can still find satisfaction in small victories, even if we're losing. Look at that difference in mindset. Got no chance of winning. It's just going to be rubbish. Oh, I lost. Great. Versus, right, I don't think I can do very well elsewhere, but I'm going to try and achieve that. Try and make this game as contentious as possible. And okay, I actually got 35 points in that. Pleased with that. Lost, expected to lose, but I achieved what I set out to do. I've learned something about this matchup now, and by me actually trying and having a positive approach and making a game of it, I've walked away from that with something. It's a big part of a growth mindset, which is super helpful at avoiding tilt. And if you haven't seen my video on goal setting and growth mindset, have a look at this video because it's all linked and very, very helpful. Speaking of a growth mindset, every game is a chance to improve after all. Instead of fixating on the result, focus on what we can learn. What went well? What could we have done differently? What didn't go well? Having that student instead of master mentality keeps the game engaging, even if the dice or the matchups are against us. But what if we find ourselves getting a bit overwhelmed or reacting badly to a situation quite frequently? Then reflection is a really good starting point for tackling this. If you feel like you're not happy with how you respond in games, just review your matches. Take a moment to reflect. What triggered that? Was it avoidable? Is there some sort of pattern that you could help to identify so that you can tackle this in your future games? Building mental resilience takes time. Not everyone has that, and the ability to laugh something off, respond positively to bad situations is a skill. And practicing mindfulness, whether it's meditation or exercise, maybe there's something else beneath why we might be reacting the way we are. If we are expecting to get better at this game but we keep losing the game, maybe that's the reason why our reactions are so blown up. Maybe you want to be better at the game than you currently are right now, and when not seeing the results happen quick enough, it's causing a bit of an extreme reaction. Seeking ways to improve and practicing mindfulness is really going to help with that. Experience is the best teacher. Yes, the more games you play, the better you'll become at handling setbacks. That is true, but focus on the process rather than the result. Just grinding games and expecting to get better isn't necessarily always the best approach. Yes, experience is great, and the more reps we have with an army, the more games we play, the better we should become. But if there's something else we need to improve upon more than just getting the games in, maybe there's elements of games or how we're reacting in the game, really reflect on what's happening that's causing the results that we're not happy with and tackle those individual problems directly. And what can really help with that is community feedback. Talk to other players about your experiences. Seek feedback during and after games. If you feel strongly you should have won that game, see if that expectation is matched by your opponent. Maybe they've seen something about that game that you have missed. And so if you're becoming frustrated at having lost that game, actually a bit of reflection with your opponent, your chances were lower than you had first thought, because maybe the matchup was worse than you predicted. Maybe there was a mistake you made in deployment that changed the landscape of that game. And it's only through these kind of reflections and these kind of discussions that can really try to unpick the root cause of what might be holding you back and ultimately leading to these kind of frustrations, if that is the sort of thing that is causing you to feel frustrated in the first place and leading to tilt. Just as an example, it's different for everybody, of course. The point I'm trying to make here is, if this is something that you're experiencing consistently in games, that frustration, that tilt, that throwing your hands up and thinking, oh, this game's over, this isn't fun anymore, what's going on? Reflecting in this way can be quite helpful at trying to identify where is that negativity coming from. Bad dice, a poor matchup, an opponent's bad attitude might be the thing that set you on tilt in the first place. If this is continually happening, maybe there's something deeper that we need to address. And whilst tilt is inevitable, it's an emotional thing. We're emotional beings. It doesn't have to define our games. By recognizing some of these triggers and thinking about some strategies to stay calm and focusing on learning, we can turn these moments of frustration into opportunities for growth. Hopefully you've learned some things to help keep your head in the game and play with purpose. Most importantly, have fun. And speaking of playing with purpose, last week I did a video about staging and how we can set up our units to play with purpose and make the most out of their activations. And if you're interested in part 2 of this video on tilt, then check out Epic Flail HQ. But that's all from me for now. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Keep rolling those dice and stay tuned for more.